afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Janice Law. I'm the founder of American Women Writers National Museum. Welcome to everybody here today, especially one of our young guests. We have Caroline, I think, right? Is it Caroline? I founded American Women Writers National Museum about 3 years ago in Washington, D.C. Women buy 70% of the books sold in America. Yet there was no national museum to honor our great American women writers. So I founded one. We are in our 3rd year. We don't have a building yet. We meet in rented space in the National Press Club. When people start museums, they often start with brick and mortar, trying to raise money for building. But I did it the exact opposite. I thought I would start with programs and get well known in the community. And so far that has happened. And then later on I would try and do bricks and mortar. The Press Club gives us this room for free, which is, we're very grateful to them. We appreciate that very much. I'm a member of the Press Club. And today we honor genres of writers. We honor individual writers. We've honored Willa Cather, Emily Dickinson, the classic women writers. We've had scholars. But we also honor genres of writers. And we've honored, for instance, librettists. We had women who wrote for the Metropolitan Opera in New York. We've had women playwrights. We've had screenwriters. Last month we had screenwriters. But this month we are honoring children's book writers. And we have with us, of course, one of the premier children's book writers in America, Valerie Tripp. And I'm going to give her a full introduction in just a moment. But I need to mention 2 things. Number one, we also have the 50 State Project. Every month we honor women writers from 4 states in alphabetical order. We've made a video for each state of women reading the works of women writers from that state. So if you want to look at any videos, they're on our website. So you can look at all of those. And this month we're honoring women writers from Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Maine. Before I introduce Valerie, I want to introduce Melinda Machado. Melinda is Chief Press Officer. I guess I have her title correct. Come on in. Come on in, take a seat. Thank you, welcome. She's Chief Press Officer for the National Museum of American History. And she has an 8-year-old daughter. So she was kind enough to loan us a couple of her daughter's dolls because her daughter couldn't be here, but Melinda's here. So she's going to take just a couple minutes before I introduce Valerie to tell you something about the 2 dolls.
Hello everyone. This is Josephina, who's quite famous, I think, in the American Girl doll world. But I somehow heard of her, and she was a Mexican-American doll. And I grew up in Texas. My mother's family was from Mexico. My father's was from Cuba. But I bought her probably in the mid-90s. I don't know, what was it? It was before the company was sold. She came in a plain white box. There was no American Girl fancy labeling. But as soon as I heard about her, I said, oh my goodness, I have to buy this doll because what if they don't make them anymore? What if nobody else wants the Mexican-American Girl doll? And I was just so heartened every time I meet people say, oh, Josefina's my favorite. And, you know, really her story translates across cultures. So, Valerie, you did a wonderful job with this character. And so I had her for many years before I had my own daughter, but she was in a box. And so when she was old enough, we brought out Josefina. And Marisol happens to be another Mexican-American girl doll that I think I probably bought when my daughter was about 1 because she's one of the girls of the year. So that's been a different way that the company, and Caroline here has Caroline, who's another girl of the year. So they each have a story, and Marisol is from Chicago and does folklore dance, and I told the folks at American Girl Doll that they truly got it right because Marisol eats something that my grandmother used to make and my daughter eats, which is hot dogs and eggs. So when you have when you can think of nothing to make for dinner, you take your hot dog, you dice it into pieces, you saute it in the pan, and then you add in your 2 eggs, scramble it all together, hot dogs and eggs for dinner. And my kid won't eat it for breakfast, it's only for dinner. So, Josephina and Marisol.
Valerie Tripp, our guest today, authors the books that go with the dolls. Our videos go on YouTube, so there's a wide audience, and I'm sure most of you know that, but not everyone who sees the video will notice that. One of the books that we have here is Meet Felicity by Valerie Tripp. That's just one of many books she's written, and that goes with a particular doll. And here's another one, is Kit, which by Valerie Tripp, which goes with a particular doll. So they're historically based and are adventures for girls. Valerie Tripp had something about her background which particularly attracted my attention because it spoke to women of my generation. She's a 1973 magna cum laude graduate of Yale in the first coeducational class. And that spoke to my generation because in my generation women were not admitted to Ivy League colleges. In fact, they were not admitted to the press club either. So sometimes we have to remember that it hasn't been that long since women were admitted to these prestigious organizations. She earned the Master of Education degree from Harvard. She lives in Silver Spring, Maryland with her husband Michael, a professor of American history, and their daughter Catherine, who I understand is pursuing a doctorate degree in the state of Washington. Pleasant Rowland, the American Girl founder, and Pleasant Rowland is a woman, describes Tripp's skill as an ability to teach without preaching and to touch the hearts of girls in a way that takes them very seriously as readers, thinkers, and people. Tripp also writes poems, songs, stories, skills book pages, and nonfiction essays for educational publishers, plus phonetically controlled stories at pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade levels of the Super Kids reading program. And some of the advice that Ms. Tripp has given to young girls: everything you are thinking about is important. You must be especially observant and thoughtful because your memories and imagination will be your best source of ideas, she has told school groups. So I give you Valerie Tripp.
I am so delighted to be here today. Monica and I were talking about how, as writers, you're isolated, and it's really a treat for me to be among colleagues, fellow writers, fellow book lovers, fellow fighters of the good fight to preserve book and story, especially books and stories for young readers and young children. So I was so pleased when Janice invited me to come and speak. And then this wonderful thing happens. You know how when you have a purpose, it's as if everything you encounter is, it means something different to you because you think, oh, you know, maybe I'll speak about that. Knowing that I was going to speak here today has been kind of a lens through which I've viewed everything that I've experienced since I received the invitation. So I really appreciated it for that reason as well. It's always nice to come and speak about writing. And as Janice pointed out, I have three different kinds of writing that I do. And I really appreciate all of you coming. I know that in October we're back at work, and it's hard to get that balance between, you know, you say, oh, you know, is this luncheon is that going to be worth it? And it's very hard to balance. And in a way that kind of set a metaphor for my whole speech today, which is I realized that all my work is a balance between, you know, the facts of history, but yet making that engaging, the teaching reading, but yet making that fun for the child. And it's always this balance, and it's kind of a tension between whimsy and then practicality as well. So being here today for all of us, I think, is also going to be a balance between delight and then, at least I hope, productive stimulation in terms of when we go back to work. And when I go to a talk, I always like to be sure that the writer actually, or the speaker actually has a plan. You know, it reassures me to know that she actually has a plan. So I have my speech all typed out all the time and everything. And so here's the plan. I'm going to talk about the 3 kinds of writing that I do, just kind of briefly, and then talk primarily about historical fiction and the American Girls collection. So, as Janice mentioned, one of my jobs, and the first job I had out of college, was writing songs, stories, plays, workbook pages, skills book pages for a reading program called Super Kids. And in fact, on the metro on the way down here today, I was making a list of words that have, and if any of you come up with any during lunch, I would appreciate it. I have to write a story that uses a lot of words that has the soft sound of C or the soft sound of G. So if as you're eating your lunch, you think of a word that has the soft sound of G, something like fence, cage, that kind of stuff. So I have to write a story. I have to go home and write a story, no more than 100 words. The story has to have a specific setting. It has to be about a girl who's playing baseball with a mitt that she has had for a very long time. And it has to use a lot of words that have soft C and soft G. I love this. I haven't seen a balance between very strict requirements, the tighter the corner, the better I like it, and then fun, too. I love writing the phonically controlled stories because I think there's sort of an assumption that those stories are, you know, fat cat sat on mat kind of thing, chased rat. And you can make those stories have heart and emotion as well. And that's one thing I really love to do. I wrote a story with no long vowels. Fritz visits Grandpa. And in the story, I'll read it to you. Grandpa has a cabin. Dad drops Fritz off at the cabin. Fritz is glad to visit Grandpa. Fritz helps Grandpa. Fritz cuts the grass. Grandpa digs. Fritz runs and jumps. Fritz gets wet. Grandpa swims. Fritz has hot dogs. Grandpa cuts up a melon. Fritz sits on the steps. Grandpa sits on the steps. The sun sets. Fritz gets into bed. Fritz hugs Grandpa. Fritz cannot rest. Fritz is a bit sad. Fritz gets up. I miss Mom and Dad. He's homesick. Grandpa has a gift for Fritz. Fritz is glad. It's a picture of his parents. Fritz can rest at last. So in the space of 10 pages, fewer than 100 words, no long vowels except a special word in 2, we have a plot and a setting and a resolution and emotion. I really love to do that. I started out right out of college working with Pleasant Rowland on the Super Kids reading program. I walked in, and I think it was a case of mistaken identity, actually. She handed me a pad of paper and said, go down there and write a song that teaches how to, spell these sight words. Luckily, I had wasted hundreds of hours listening to, show albums and Beatle records and stuff like that, and I was too shy to go back and say, Pleasant, I think you have the wrong person. So I just sat down and wrote a song, and then that was my job, to write songs to help children use the song as a mnemonic device, learning how to spell words that don't conform to phonic rules, like, for example, rain comes down, D-O-W-N, drizzle to T-O-O, but there is still a lot to do, play or work, W-O-R-K, stay inside, think of many M-A-N-Y games to try, so at first, F-I-R-S-T may be sad, but rainy days are not too bad. And then the child sings that over. I know we're going to have singing today. So that was a very fun job. And while Pleasant and I were doing that job, our real job, writing these stories, we would talk and talk and talk about the books we loved when we were growing up. Pleasant has a lot of sisters. I have a lot of sisters. I grew up in what my husband refers to as a house full of girlness. It was a house full of girlness. And Pleasant and I would talk about the books that we loved. And I remember saying, you know what I hate? I hate it when it's the girl character who says to the boy, don't go in that cave. It's like I wanted the girls to come. I thought I was the heroine and the, antagonist and the problem maker in my own story, and I wanted to write books about girls who were like that as well. So Pleasant got married, and she moved to Wisconsin. I got married and moved to South Carolina. One day she called up and she said, Valerie, I've had this idea. Let's write stories about girls who lived in different periods of history. I'm like, oh, I love that. I love historical fiction. That's fabulous. Pleasant, she said. And the girls, the characters, will be the same age as the girls who read the books. Like, yay, this is terrific. Oh, I love this. This is going to be just fabulous and everything. And then she said, hey, I got another idea. We're going to have dolls going along with the books. I'm like, listen, for heaven's sake, that's terrible. That's just a ridiculous idea. So luckily she did not listen to me. To this day, when a person has a new business idea, she calls me up, and I say, you know, I just don't think that's going to work. She knows she's got a real 7 years later with American Girl, and it has been my absolute privilege, delight, and honor to be the voice of American Girl for all of these years. So I have had a great time writing books about girls, empowering girls, and then about 5 years ago, 2 women came to me and they said, we don't think, they were mothers of sons, they said, we don't think we've done for boys what we have done for girls, which is write books, realistic fiction books, about boys, and showing the boys to be the way we know boys are. You know, that they're kind, that they can be nurturing, that they do have deep emotional richness in everything, that they have quirky interests, that they have interior lives. It's not just Captain Underpants. No flies. Ooh, I'm Captain Underpants. That didn't come out very nicely. But, I mean, no slur. But I do think we wanted to create stories for boys. So we came up with this wonderful logo. And my partners, Anne and Peggy, and I have these books called Boys Camp. And our line is, every boy has a great story. So boys are at summer camp where they can reinvent themselves. One of the books is about a boy who's very interested in birds. At school, kids call him the bird nerd. When he comes to camp, he meets boys who say, oh, I think that's fabulous that you're interested in birds. We wanted to show that the message we had given to girls, don't let anyone talk you out of any passion, interest, talent, or curiosity that you have. We didn't feel we had given that same message in books to boys. So we've got 2 books out and a 3rd one being illustrated and a 4th one on my desk waiting for me to get to work on it. On this particular project, on Boys Camp, I'm the editorial director, and oh my gosh, anybody out here do editing? Man, is that hard. I'm going to admit to you that I think I thought, oh well, you know, I know how to write a story, so I know how, oh my gosh. Editing is extremely difficult because I think, oh, I love that sentence, oh, that's fabulous, oh, I love the way she did that. It's really hard for me to change somebody else's work because I know how hard it is to get that story on the page. So I have incredible newfound respect and admiration for editors, and it has had a wonderful effect working with my American Girl editors that I am now so grateful that someone's willing to dive into my story with me and help me bring that story to fruition. So that brings me to my project that I work on most of the time, which is American Girl. When we first started on the American Girl story, when we first started talking about it, it was actually very late 80s, and so we knew that we wanted to write about girls who were the protagonists of their own stories. It was absolutely purpose-driven, feminist empowerment statement, absolutely, that we wanted to make. We knew exactly what we wanted to do, and it was so much fun. I remember we sat underneath a big tree, the State House in Madison, Wisconsin, and we talked about, you know, what periods of history we wanted to cover. And so we started, and what would be, you know, the sort of the best order to do it. So the first 3 characters were Kirsten, who's here. This is your genuine first Kirsten, well-loved, well-coiffed, well-cared for. So thank you very much for bringing Kirsten with you. She was one of our very first girls. Oh, and I had to tell a story on Pleasant that from the beginning she said, oh, Valerie, you worry about the stories and I'll take care of all the other stuff. So Kirsten was originally called Rebecca, and she was from Norway. And I did an enormous amount of research about Norway and had written out the story plan. And one day Pleasant called up and she said, Valerie, I have found the most adorable sweater that comes from Sweden. So now Rebecca's out, and we're going to have a character named Kirsten from Sweden. So it's just because of this adorable sweater that she comes. Some people always say, you know, what comes first, the doll or the story? And usually the story comes first, but sometimes there's this sort of gravitational pull, and that's what happened with Kirsten. And then the other first character we chose was Samantha, because I felt it was crucial to write about somebody who lived at the turn of the last century where things changed so dramatically for women. And I wanted Samantha pulled between her grandmother, who had sort of an Edwardian Victorian view. That's why it's one generation removed, that Samantha's parents are dead. I wanted it to be sort of much older than her own parents would be, saying, you know, women shouldn't vote, women shouldn't have jobs, women shouldn't go to college, women shouldn't gather in public places. And then Samantha has the influence of her aunt, Cornelia, who's saying women should vote, women should voice their opinions, women should go to college, women should have jobs. So I wanted that tension there. And then the third character we came up with right from the very beginning was Molly, living at the time of World War II. And then I got to choose which one, you know, which one I wanted to write about first. And I chose Molly, and I'll tell you, I chose Molly because I kind of felt sorry for her. I thought, oh, you know, Samantha's going to have all that gorgeous, you know, Victorian stuff, the brass bed and the Victorian house, and Kirsten has nature itself as her antagonist. And oh my gosh, that decision, although made for all the wrong reasons, turned out to be a great decision, because Molly was funny, and it was Molly, good old Molly, who taught me what I was doing, because quite frankly, between you and me, I had the vaguest idea when I sat down to write Meet Molly, which was the very first American Girl book, and the first American Girl book I wrote, or that anybody wrote, and it was Molly who showed me, here's what I had to do, to figure out the major gestalt of the time, the major political, economic, and social issues of the time. And then my character, my little 9-year-old character, had to be a girl-sized version of that. She had to let my reader know what my reader's life would be if she lived during that period. Yes, that's kind of your classic historical fiction, but more important than that, my character had to, her life problem had to be the problem of the period she was living in. Felicity is actually the easiest one to explain. I did Felicity, well, right after Molly, I sort of adopted Samantha, because the person who was writing about Samantha didn't want to do it anymore, so I wrote the rest of the stories about Samantha. And then I did Felicity, and we didn't do them in chronological order at all. And Felicity wants more independence than a girl would have had in the 18th century, and so too she lives in the colonies that want independence from the king, and she learns that independence is self-governance, it's not self-indulgence at all, and so too the colonies learn. So her story is a girl-sized version of what's going on right at the time of the American Revolution. Once I come upon that, once I find my allegory, you might call it, or metaphor, once I find that, then my story can really take off. And it was good old Molly, the very first one, who sort of taught me to do that. If that idea of writing a girl-sized version of, you know, major historical things sounds ambitious, that's because it is. That's because it is. And I take those stories very, very seriously. I take my reader very, very seriously. My reader is my inspiration. You know, I always start out thinking about, you know, what a girl like Caroline's life is like right now in 2014. And then the story that I like to think of, the story that has a lovely sort of, my story's like a ribbon of connection that starts with Caroline and flows through time and connects her to this character I'm writing about that lives long ago and far away. And that ribbon of connection is made up of some things that we have in common, and then other things that have changed dramatically over time as well. But I think one of the things that we have in common is, for example, figuring out what is my unique contribution. I think I'm here on Earth to figure out what work I'm here to do and then do it. But what is that for me? And so I'd like to have the girls struggle somewhat. The other thing that I have to show all the time is that Heraclitus, of course, had it right. You can't step in the same river twice. In all the stories that I write, there are losses. There are changes. Molly's father is away. He won't be there the first time she rides a bicycle, and he just never will, and he's going to miss that. That's a loss. That is a loss. And I try to say to all of the girls who read the stories, you know, there are going to be losses and changes in your lives too. Gosh, when I wrote the kid books, I didn't mean to be, but it turned out to be sort of prescient. It was right before the economic downturn, and Kit's story, which takes place during the Depression, which was actually tremendously based on my mother's life. My mother's father actually died. Then they lost his business. He owned a hotel. Her mother had to take boarders into their house. My mother had to be kind of a maid. Her brother delivered papers. She couldn't go to journalism school, which had been her dream. So Kit's story is very much based on her story. And when I wrote these, it was scary to me how they resonated with girls who were reading them, saying, yeah, I know how that is. My mom just lost her job too. So the way that the stories, that ribbon of connection, sometimes is rather taut. Sometimes it's rather strong, and then other times it's more metaphorical. But it's very important to me to say to my readers, yeah, you're not going to be the same at the end as you were at the beginning. None of these characters can be the same. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It's up to you, though. It's up to you, though, to make it all right. And you're going to have to face those challenges and the losses and the problems and everything and dig into yourself. But a friend of mine told me this wonderful quote. You know how they say, God doesn't give you more than you can handle? God does actually give you more than you can handle, but not more than you can handle with the help of all of your friends and your community and your family and your teachers and the people who love you and everything. So I try to show that in the books as well, that, you know, if you seek it, people will support you. So the history, I hope, leads my reader to use her own life as a sort of a basis of comparison and to reflect on her own experience and to ask her own family questions. It sort of awakens awareness in a child so that she'll say, you know, what is my view? And I'm always hoping that my reader will see, she is what history is. She is what history is. And so therefore she better pay attention. She better pay attention. She can't, you know, we're sort of trying to tickle sort of a moral intelligence, I think, into being in a child, a feeling of responsibility at the same time that she has a feeling of empowerment. So we begin with my reader, what her life is like right now in 2014, and I'd like to create this connection with her, made up of things they have in common: school, or chores, friends, family, and I use the voice of a 9 going on 10-year-old girl because I want my reader to make friends with the character. I feel as though, gosh, my husband who teaches American history would hate to hear me say this, but if you just tell me the facts about stuff, you know, like Lewis and Clark were in this place at this time, it's kind of like, whoosh. But if you say to me, so they go to a meeting with the Shoshone, and they're going to starve and die if they don't get some horses, and Sacagawea jumps up because she recognizes her brother. You're like, oh my gosh, I love it. You know, incredible, a strong emotional connection like that. You're like, oh, fabulous. So you want to care, you want to invest, you want your reader to invest in your character and feel, she's my friend. So it really matters to me. You know, I'm sad when something sad happens to her. It really matters because she is my friend. So I hope that that ribbon of connection has some sort of, you know, integrity. And the integrity, I think, would come from emotion. So my readers kind of spring from two sources. I mean, my stories, from the reader and then also from the research that I do, which I absolutely love doing. I was just telling Rose that, do you ever say yes to something and you think, who said yes? Oh my gosh. Sometimes I think I'm like a split personality and one part's very hard on the other. And so the American Girl asked me if I would write a mystery. And I thought, well, I've never written a mystery. And I said, in a moment of weakness, I said yes, and I'm having a fabulous time. Just a great time doing it. And it's about Josephina. So my husband and I cooked it up as a very flimsy excuse to go to New Mexico and have a fantastic time. So I'm very grateful to Josephina. We're kind of, you know, pretending to gather in impressions and stuff like that. But I loved traveling when I was researching the Josefina stories. My family went to New Mexico about 5 or 7 summers in a row. And now, in fact, my daughter's boyfriend is from New Mexico, and I feel Josephina and I are responsible for that. My daughter think, oh, everything from New Mexico is great. So her boyfriend is from New Mexico. And, you know, when I was in New Mexico, I would sort of sidle up to women in the grocery line and say, hi, how are you? And try to wheedle my way into an invitation to their house. I ask them, what did your mother teach you that her mother had said was the most important thing for you to know? Or, I had my hair cut twice in one summer just so I could interview the hair cutter and have her tell stories and teach shows and all the things that were very, that were very important to her. So I always like to say to writers, research is, traveling and talking to people and reading, of course, and, trying recipes. I took cooking lessons. My whole family's like, cooking lessons. They actually never got the benefit of any cooking lessons. But, I wanted to have all my senses engaged. Your research should engage all of your senses. So I try to put all of these things together, talk to advisors, and sort of delve back into my own memories as well. When I was writing the very first book, as I said, about Molly, I had just really no idea what I was doing. And so it happened, as it happened, when I was sitting down to write Meet Molly, it was Halloween. So I said to myself, now, kids trick-or-treat now. I know kids went trick-or-treating when Molly was growing up, and I went trick-or-treating too. So I started to remember a Halloween when my friends and I were about 10 years old. And here's what we did. We made Hawaiian hula skirts out of a newspaper. And that was good because there was a lot of focus in the 40s on Hawaii because of Pearl Harbor, sadly. People were very conscious of Hawaii. So my friends and I, then this was in the 60s, you take the newspaper, you keep the folded part up around your waist, and newspapers used to be bigger. And I used to and then we cut it in strips, and then we stapled strips of green crepe paper on there, and we had fabulous swishy grass skirts, and then we made lace out of Kleenexes. You know how you can make those look like flowers, and squirted them with perfume. Some houses we did the hula. And on the way home with our brown paper bags, just bulging with treats and everything, we got a little carried away. We were coming home from trick-or-treating, and a boy named Stevie Brown jumped out from behind the bush. Squirted us with a hose, ruined our costumes. Now granted, they were all made out of paper anyway, but nevertheless, ruined our costumes, and then the paper bags got wet on the bottom and split and burst, and our treats fell on the sidewalk, and we got scolded for making us. I was so mad. I was 10, I wrote the first Molly book. When I was 34, I waited 24 years. The very first chance I had to get married, and I love to picture, Stevie Brown, that's the name of the guy who jumped at us, and he's reading Meet Molly out loud to his sweet little daughter, and he comes to that part and he goes, just a second, who wrote this book? That's when he sees my name. So I always like to say to fellow writers, I'm sure you're a lot nicer than I am. And I'm sure you forgive. Forgiving's fine, fine, fine. Don't forget. Okay, forgive, that's fine, but don't forget. Promise me that tuck away in your heart, or your brain, and your memory, the things that are happening to you. I say this when I speak to, Brownie troops and Girl Scouts troops too. Don't say, yeah, I'm just a kid, whatever. No. You have to start paying attention all the time and noticing things that have a lot of affect connected to them. I promise you, if you do that, it's a treasure chest that you can delve into. When I was writing the story about Emily, the girl who comes from London because London's being bombed at the time of World War II, I was able to do penance for a sin. When I was growing up and I took clarinet, I was supposed to practice 45 minutes every day. I would practice 15 minutes, give the book to my mother. She would sign that I had practiced 15 minutes. She'd say those were the longest 15 minutes of my entire life listening to clarinet. And I would take it in, and then I would change the 1 to a 4. So my teacher thought, he would say, I don't know, you're just so terrible. And after 45 minutes. And I felt awful about this, dragging my mother into varsity. That is low. So, oh my gosh, in that case I waited 40 years. But I wrote Brave Emily, and I had Emily do exactly what I had done. And I made Emily have to give a performance in front of the entire school, the entire PTA. Oh, yeah. But it made me feel better because I was able to sort of undo this terrible thing that I had done. So writing comes certainly from our failures and foibles as much as our successes. And truly, I can't stress enough how it's important when you're writing for children to respect them, to respect them. Because it seems to me that children are the absolute personification, they are the embodiment of potential and promise. They are, if you're looking at a child, you are looking at the future. And you're looking at a wonderful future. And I know that children come to the world with their arms wide open, ready to embrace that world. And they're energetic, and they're passionate, and they are exuberant, and they're earnest, and they're not cynical. And I'm not going to teach them to be cynical, because I think that's a dead end. I think that's a dead end. I don't think we do children a favor bumming them out. I think we want to reassure them that, as I say, there'll be losses, there'll be hurt, there'll be disappointment, but there's going to be survival. There's going to be survival. And I also know that the children that I'm writing for have this wonderful awareness of growing and changing, so they feel that sort of push me, pull you too. I'm not telling them anything they don't know. It grows organically from their own experience. I'm observing and I'm articulating, but it comes from them. I'm not putting it down on top, and I think that's a very important thing to do when you write for children also. That's what Pleasant meant about not preaching. I realized, I was writing the Felicity books, and I realized my own daughter was not standing around listening to all the wisdom I had to share. Oh my gosh, in fact, when I told her that I was coming here to speak today, she said, Mom, don't get nervous, because really, most people don't really listen anyway. I think maybe you don't really listen. How's it me? So, you know, whatever we want to instill, shall we say, whatever we want to expose our reader to or instill, we can do that. But I think we have to be artful. I don't think Pleasant would used to, on a manuscript, if I had gotten too preachy, she would write thud in all capital letters. Thud. And I'd think, ooh, okay, we're going to have to massage that a little bit. You know, we have to put a little air into that. Because what we want to do is teach the children, you know, that we can challenge given wisdom. They don't have to take my word for something. They can have a different point of view even on what I'm telling them. We want to teach them the value, actually, of tolerance and compassion. Teach them, you know, to celebrate creativity and drive and change. And I think, you know, the world has changed, but I think what young readers need sort of basically hasn't changed. That they need to feel safe and loved first, before then they can feel free. I think that's our job as people who write for children. And so that means that my stories can't be spinach, you know, just good for you, but not something that, you know, we seek out as a snack, perhaps. It can't be spinach, but it can't be potato chip either. It can't be just useless, no socially redeeming value, just, you know, just kind of air, filler. It has to be a nice balance between those two, neither spinach nor potato chip. And we have to sort of also be sure that we're always delighting our reader and that we are connecting with them through sort of mischief and joy and friendship as well. I read a lovely paragraph in a review of Alice McDermott's book, Someone, and this is by Roxana Robinson. She says, there are many reasons to write a novel, and those of you who write for children, I think, should especially take this apart. One, maybe the best reason, is to bear compassionate witness to what it is to be alive in this place, this time. Bear compassionate witness. Isn't that wonderful? I wish I could just, you know, keep that in my mind. Oh, bear compassionate witness. Because compassionate to me has a wonderful, expansive, and inclusive, not exclusive feeling to it. This kind of novel is necessary to us. We need to know about other lives. This kind of knowledge expands our understanding. It enlarges our souls. There are differences between us, but there are things we share. Fear and vulnerability, joy and passion, the capacity for love and pain and grief. Those are common to us all. So I'm going to end as I began, saying that you all helped me kind of step back to a meta level, think about what I do and why I do it. And then I realized that what I really wanted to give to all of you today was to sort of give you that gift right back, so that you too will go home inspired or more questioning, or in any case more mindful and aware of why you do what you do as well. So thank you very much for inviting me here to do this, and thank you for listening so well today.
Can you talk a little bit about the integration of the illustration with what you were writing?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Originally, the plan was to have the illustrations reminiscent of the style of art that was popular during the period. So without even thinking about it, the reader was kind of having a lesson in art history, in a sense that, for example, Molly's pictures were kind of Norman Rockwell-esque. So she would, without a word being spoken, she would know that that was a style. Then, of course, the other thing about a really good illustration is, truly, it's like a silent movie. It should be that I could look at the illustrations and say, uh-oh, you know, Samantha's very sad in this illustration. That the illustrations have to show us these important turning points and points of high emotion. Then, of course, the other thing specific to historical fiction is that we'll have spot art of something that might be unfamiliar. You know, if I mention Kirsten's lunchtime, we have to know, oh, that's her pail that she brings her lunch in. So the spot art is to help with your vocabulary as well, because you don't want your reader to stumble over something and say, well, oh, now I've lost the thread of the story because I don't know what that thing is. So the spot art helps with the comprehension as well. So the art serves many purposes. And I have to say, too, for me, the art is just a great, great pleasure. You know, I told you I was writing the books about Samantha, and this is what it looks like. You know, I send in this is actually Felicity, but I send it in, see all those yellow Post-it notes and everything. That's what comes back to me from my editor. All subject, luckily, you can't read what she's saying, so they're not compliments on there. There are all ways I should change this and make it better. So I wrote a book about Samantha, sent it in, and my editor said, you know, Valerie, I'm not going to waste yellow Post-it notes, it's so bad. Just throw that one away and start over. So then I did another version, it was Happy Birthday, Samantha, and sent that in, and she said, oh, geez, you know, I wouldn't have thought this was possible, but the second was actually worse even than the first one. So sometimes it goes back and forth and back and forth. And then what was happening was, what I wanted was for Samantha to move into New York. I didn't want her to live in Mount Bedford, which, you know, I grew up in Mount Bedford. Here's a picture of my niece in front of Samantha's house. I walk past this house every single day on my way to school. But I thought, no, it's getting boring in Mount Bedford. I want her to move to New York where all the action is and everything. So I wrote a story where Graham Mary died. And I was driving, my husband was driving me to the FedEx drop-off box to try to get the story in on time, and I read out loud to him, he goes, honey, he goes, you know, that's so cold. He said, you're just going to bump Graham Mary off because she's boring you. I'm sure he's saying to himself, what kind of person am I married? Why should I with me? You know, I like Graham Mary. So I said, I'll turn the car around. So and I wrote a whole other story where Graham Mary, instead of dying, she marries a guy, and they're going to sail around the world together on a yacht. So Samantha can't live with them because she has to stay home to go to school. So yay, who has to save Graham Mary's life? Sailing around the world's a lot more fun than dying. So anyway, the artist sends me the sketch, and he sent the sketch, and I had to say, in this case, I was the one to say, gosh, you know, I kind of like his hair, I don't really like his nose, his eyes are close together, I don't like that mustache, I don't like the look on his suit, what's the matter with the button, you know, something, so I had to say pretty much back to the drawing board. And then the artist gave him a complete makeover, so he looked the way he was supposed to look. You know, you don't want to say, I'll tell you what, Graham Mary, you're going out on a limb marrying that guy. You want to tell me, okay, I get it. So what in the book, everything has to work hard to tell the story. And when, for example, in Felicity, this is the bad guy. I need you to look at him and go, oh, that is the bad guy. This is actually, the model for this is actually the artist's father-in-law. I'm sure the very nice man. And the artist said, oh, Dad, would you mind, you know, looking mean because you're going to be the bad guy. I'm hoping his hometown people go, I know all about you. I read those Felicity books and I know the truth. So yeah, you're not a good person. So the art has to really support. And usually what happens is the art tells me things about the character I didn't know. I'll see the illustration and I'll think, the artist saw something about that character that I didn't know. So the art supports, more than supports the book. I feel that it's more than 100%. And very important, almost more than integration. It's support and an expansion of the story as well. I heard you saying that you're thinking about writing and your daughter's an illustrator. Right. So it's good that you'll be able to work very closely together and be very clear about how hard you want those pictures, those illustrations to work. Any other questions?
you don't strike me as a shy person. You mentioned that you are at some level of your being. Can you reconcile those?
I'm what is called a compensated introvert. I'm a compensated introvert. You learn how to, and also, I told you, Monica and I were talking about how much fun it is. It's kind of like, I'll be able to go home and say, honey, I talked to some real life writers today. I really met some colleagues. And it's exhilarating to spend time with people who do the same kind of work that you do and who are interested. And also I have to say what a treat, because usually, I love it. I absolutely love it. But usually I'm in the all-purpose room, and at one point during my talk, here come the cafeteria ladies with pizza. And I can't pay attention to my talk anymore after the ladies come in with the pizza. So usually this is very elegant to be in this setting, so I'm enjoying it very much. Any other questions about writing?
Well, in a given week, how do you divide your different disciplines of writing? Do you dedicate a couple days a week? How do you allocate your time?
Okay, nobody could do, this is going to be recorded, right?
Yes.
Well, I decided I don't want to waste my time on the metro, so I'm coming up with those soft G words. So your brain's working on stuff all the time. And last night I sat up bolt upright at about 3:30 and thought, oh my gosh, I didn't explain why Josefina's, friend Teresita is disappearing. I better get. So I find it like cross-training in sports that I love to switch from a very intense, deep thinking out of a mystery, if I say this, will that ruin that timing, to the fun of a 100-word phonically controlled story with soft C and soft G in it, that I find it very refreshing, actually. I love having the different centuries all on my desk at the same time, because I think, oh geez, Josefina, now I'm writing about a good kid, and they have telephones. You'd love it, Josefina. Oh my gosh, kid can turn a faucet and water comes out. Josefina, you see what I mean? So it's kind of like time travel, and it's very fun for me to make the switch. So it isn't neat and tidy. It isn't, specifically one kind of job in the morning. In fact, I think one reason why I get so much done is that I have the variety, and I enjoy the switching back and forth, and using your brain in a different way is refreshing. So I wish I could say that it was organized.
Oh no, that's much more reassuring.
That's right. That's right.
Is it me? Yes. So I'm an aspiring children's writer. What advice can you give me and others like me?
Well, I think the main thing that I would say is not to get discouraged. I would say that one of the most helpful things about doing boys camp was I realized how discouraging it is, and how lucky I was that it was really a sort of friendship that I got started with Pleasant, writing with the Super Kids, and then the American Girl, and then when we were starting out on our own, how hard it was. So I think the main thing I like to say to aspiring writers is don't get discouraged. And so let's have that as our heading. And underneath that, I would say, number one, don't let someone talk you into writing a different kind of book from the kind of book you want to write. I am not making this up. A publisher will tell you, the bookstore is going to tell us what shelf this book is going to be placed on, therefore you have to create the book that will fit the length, and you're like, well, that's not being fair to my reader, that's not being fair to me, that's not being fair to creativity or imagination. Don't let them talk you into creating what is just kind of a slightly morphed version of something that's out there already. If that's not what's in your heart and in your brain, it'll kill you as a writer to do that. Don't do that. And then I'm also wondering, don't get discouraged is, don't get discouraged about chaos. Chaos is part of the creative process. If you had seen my notes for this speech before I came here today, you would think, I'm telling you what, I am not going to that speech because it is a mess. In the beginning, it's just all in a mist, and slowly it comes clear to you. So don't get discouraged if you think, yeah, but I'm not even sure how this is going to end. Don't worry, and don't get discouraged, and also don't get discouraged if, this is like, what I'm saying is you're going to say, sure. This is so hard. You'll write, you'll have the most gorgeous metaphor anyone ever thought of. It's clicking, it's working beautifully. The next day you come back and you think, oh, I'm gonna have to cut that whole thing. It doesn't, it doesn't work, it doesn't earn its real estate in my story. Oh, that's so hard. That is so hard, but don't get discouraged, because just tuck it away, maybe you can sneak it into it. All those versions of that story I wrote about Samantha that got rejected, I tucked them away, and then they were making a movie about Samantha, and they called me and said, oh my gosh, we need some new scenes. Don't you know, I had several new scenes. Get those new scenes so quickly. Those new scenes have been in my drawer for 15 years. So, nothing's wasted. Nothing's wasted. It is extremely discouraging to, the phrase we use is kill your darlings, where you can't use that paragraph that you just is the best paragraph ever. But you will find a place for it. You will find a place for it. So, the heading is don't get discouraged, and then there are several subheadings under that. And I think a good way not to get discouraged is to be sure that you are fueling and nurturing yourself with the realization that what you are doing matters. Yes, we do need a new book out there. Have you ever gone to ALA or the Big Book Expos, and you think, oh, I'm doing people a favor if I never read another word or drown it. Don't do that, don't do that. We do need to hear specifically your story that's fresh and new and original. So, keeping in mind don't get discouraged, and then the various ways that one gets discouraged underneath that, I think it's just persevere, because somebody's out there who's going to see the brilliance of your book and how it's unique and how it has never existed before and couldn't have come from anyone but you, and that's why you do what you do. So don't be discouraged.
Thank you very much.
Way in the back.
Well, I wanted to know, when I first started writing, I wrote some children's books, and it was very discouraging because when I sent it out, you got a lot of rejections.
Yes.
And then I got a promising response where they wanted it. And then when I sent it in, after they wanted it, they were calling me, they were sending me letters. I was so excited. And then they got it, and they said, we thought we wanted it. We really don't want it. But this is after us being in communication and everything else. When you were first starting out, I heard you when you said you sent in 2 versions, and they were like, I didn't think that could be worse than the first one you sent in, but you need to do another one. But you're already doing it. But when you're trying to get someone to, are you looking at specifically the kind of publishing houses that are just focused on the kind of writing that you do? And how do you really determine that? Because, when you're writing, you're sending stuff to different people, and, you're all excited. And so just trying to target specifically the right direction to send what you're writing.
Yes, that's very hard. One thing I like to do is go to the library or bookstore and see the books that I like, see if I like their production values, if I like the kind of book that they're putting out, if I respect them, chances are better that they'll respect me as well. But I have to tell you that when we were trying to find somebody to be interested in the boys' camp books, we went to the ALA, American Library Association thing, and literally I would go around tugging on people's sleeves, please listen to us, and they're like, man, I'm going to call security. Because no one listened. No one listened. It was incredibly difficult. And then just kind of fluky, out of the blue, a little tiny publisher in New York was interested, but it's very tough to find the right home. And one thing that just drives me crazy is when they make you wait like that. Because you're saying to yourself, listen, if you're going to say no right away, don't let this thing molder. Also, things are timely. You might be writing something that, that would be a wonderful tie into the Olympics, let us say. And then if 2 years go by, then you've lost your moment. So it's very frustrating. And I think publishing companies are scrambling to survive. And I just wish they had the courage of their convictions more to say, well, we think this is a work of value, and even though it's not, like a watered-down Harry Potter, or, even though there are no vampires in it, we're going to take a risk on it, And that's where the not getting discouraged part, and the almost deliberately being sure that your voice is unique. I think it's almost harmful thing to read too many other things that are out there right now, because maybe even subconsciously or unconsciously you will be influenced by them. I just don't think that's a good idea. You've got your voice, and if it's quirky, good. If it's weird, if it's different, good. But as for the timing and dealing with publishing companies, you and I have lunch someday. We'll just really, I'll tell you, we can spend 2 hours talking about how discouraging hard that is.
Would you comment on self-publishing and ebooks and how they're changing that landscape? I know my daughter refuses to read anything on the ebook reader. She says she wants real books. But
Yeah, she likes the
I know the
books.
trend is certainly not in the favor for real hardbacks.
Basically, I feel as though I don't really care what the vehicle is, as long as the story is good and worth it and, engages your reader. I don't really care the vehicle, graphic novels or ebooks or books on tape or anything. That doesn't really matter to me. As people who are interested in writing,
what do you do in this changing landscape?
It's a very quick, very changing landscape, and in some ways I feel as though self-publishing is seductive because it gets you to what you want, which is a book in your hand. It's a physical, it exists a book in your hand. So in some ways I feel it is seductive, and that if you can pursue having it published by a house and not yourself, that's a superior thing to do, because then you will have the marketing muscle of that house behind you, and you'll have the protection of that publishing house behind you, and you'll have the distribution of that publishing house behind you. So it would be as if you expected yourself to, be the center forward, who always sank the shot, in addition to being the person who provided the ice water, in addition to being the person who, swept. That's asking a lot of yourself to be the person who does everything for your own book. That said, if what you want is almost a book as a legacy, if you just want what you created to exist as a legacy to hand down, then self-publishing is a perfectly respectable, legitimate way to have your book come into existence. It is dangerous to aim toward the final product. That way lies misery, that what you have to love is the day-to-day, the hope that incredible, and all of you know it, I know you do, that incredible moment where you look up and you think, it got dark. You were working and you just got so engaged and absorbed in what you were doing that time passed, that somehow it flipped from being disciplined to you were just deeply engaged into it. That has to be your reward. That finding that, being deeply, deeply into your writing has to be, the process itself has to be the reward, not the final thing. Because actually what happens is you're like, oh, I have this brand new book and I wrote it so long ago, it's kind of like, I'm on to something else now. So that you think that the finished book is going to, I never go back and reread my books. And you think that the finished product is the be all and end all, but really, all I'm going to sound like everybody's mother always says stuff like this. It's the doing of it. It's the doing of it. It's the experience of it. It's the process. So
this is a little bit less about writing, but I'm just curious: is when you were writing these books, did you have any focus or any idea that this would be such a legacy and would last a lifetime? I sit here as like a 25-year-old girl that was obsessed with my Molly doll and still have every single piece apart. I would have brought her had I thought about it. And then I see the girls that are now 8 or 9 that are still did you write this in a certain way to try to make it be something that would never, or was that not even a consideration when you were writing it?
Well, first let me say I always love meeting what I think of as my alums. A grown-up girl, and I love how sometimes reading the books has influenced an interest, that person grows up to be a writer or a journalist or a historian or, costume designer because of their experience with American Girl. And let me also say that smart girls always like Molly. And so no, and here's a funny thing, when I write, I really write with just, just Caroline in mind, just one avid reader I don't think of the past or the future, and I run into trouble with my editors because sometimes they are a little, my books may be a little peculiar. I mean, I have a very particular voice and a very particular worldview, and she'll say, you know, I think that's a joke in your family, Valerie. Anyway, yes, and it's a funny joke. So, no, I think of one, it's just me and this one child, and I feel as though reading is sometimes the first independent and intimate act a child does. It's you and that book. And I feel like, okay, I'm with you, but you're the one who's going to, one person, just all I want is one, to take these little squiggles, put them together to be words, the words to be sentences, the sentences paragraphs, and maybe you'll laugh at the joke, or maybe you'll be sad. One person, it's a very intimate connection. It's really you and the book. It's really, when I speak to young readers, I always say, now I want you to promise me, starting today, you're going to sit up straighter, y'all. Sit up straighter. Open your eyes wider. Listen more carefully, because you're pulling in impressions, and you're going to apply them to the stories that you read. Just you. This belongs to you. And that's one reason why I'm a little bit sad when the books are made into movies, because now I think everybody thinks, oh yeah, Kit looks like Abigail Breslin. Maybe that's not, you know, when I read Gone with Wind, I always took off Red Butler's mustache. I don't want him to have a mustache, so when I'm reading the book, I can take it off. You're in charge. So I write one reader in mind. And I don't think I thought about longevity, but I sure did know that the books would be layered, that the books I had appreciated when I was growing up took me seriously as a reader, didn't brush me off. I didn't like that sort of coy, almost laughing at the character thing that some books do for children. It's like, hey, I wanted a book that, met me where I was and assumed that I was curious, and assumed that I was smart, and assumed that I was interested in the world. So I knew I had all those purposes in mind, and then no, I didn't foresee it lasting this long. And you know, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I remember going to talks when I was your age and thinking, well, you know, she's 63 years old. I mean, no wonder she's got all those books out there, because she's been writing for a very long time. And how about me? You know, I'm trying to get my first book out there. It's like, and it starts somewhere. It starts somewhere, and you know, then when you're 63, you'll be standing up here. You know, you'll be the one talking about your, you know, collection of works as well. It has to start someplace. And it starts with you, your imagined perfect reader, and the wonderful intimacy of story and reader. Oh no, you're not Rose, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm not Rose. I loved what you said about the kind of creative constraints that you had when you're writing your book, because as a child, when I was reading your books and playing with your dolls, like, that's what I loved about it, was that I felt like I could connect with the character as a doll and like kind of create and extend my own stories.
Yes.
And that kind of connected to what you said about clear thinking is great writing. How do you kind of work through that chaos that you were talking about?
I think that you get to a point where you appreciate the chaos, because you don't, to switch metaphors a little bit, think of it as, you know, like the trunk of a tree with many multitude of possible branches, and some of them are little bit skinny twigs, and you're not sure which is going to be the one that's really the branch that's going to pay off. But all that chaos and all those possibilities, and being able to keep them all in your mind at the same time, I think is a crucial thing. And then realizing, if I don't use it now, maybe I can use it later. And I loved what you said. People often say to me, oh, you know, how do you feel about the fact that they're, you know, dolls based on the characters that you write about? And people call them American Girl doll books, and the people even say the books about the dolls, you know, as if the dolls come to life or something, which is of course not, you know, it starts with history and then the characters and then the dolls. But I have come to appreciate the dolls because they do allow someone, an imaginative person like you, to lift that story off the page and make up other chapters for her, you know, and just sort of imagine it. No one has ever plumbed the depths of the mystery of the relationship to a doll. That sometimes I'm the doll's mother, then fluidly a girl will switch to being the doll herself, and then fluidly her friend, and then back. It's just this incredible wonderful, healthy exercise in empathy and compassion. And heaven knows we could use more of that, couldn't we, in the world? You know, the ability to morph yourself and imagine how someone else might feel. And so I have come to value that play element, the element of the physical entity of that doll that helps a girl engage with the story. And that she's got somebody on her side all the time. These girls are on your side. And I think we all like that feeling too, that we have someone who's a friend and a stalwart friend and a loyal friend that we have adventures with.
Well, I just want to say, I truly loved history because of what you wrote. It felt like we actually went to those places, and that was kind of my first introduction to history. I think that's so incredible. You can take us those places in a not hitting us over the head kind of way with the details, but along those lines, how do you find that kind of middle ground between telling a young reader, this is the history, this is the time period, different yet similar to what you're experiencing now, and still create that sense of you're learning at the same time?
That is my daily task. That's my daily task, to sit down and be sure. Now I'm not getting lazy and having, you know, a classroom scene where the teacher can explain what it means to be an ally in World War II. I have to show what it means to be an ally. I have to have my reader experience vicariously through her emotional connection to my character what it feels like to, you know, be in a rowboat on a lake when it's choppy and starting to rain in a thunderstorm. So yeah, the history is it's very challenging, to be sure. I mean, accurate and authentic. And at the same time, I'm engaging a child reader. I'm not assuming a tremendous amount of background knowledge. I can't just blithely assume that the child is familiar, you know, with the history of the Depression, for example. And I have to be sure that I gently lead into the facts so that the facts matter. That's very hard to do, and it's not successful. I'm not successful at it all the time. Sometimes I feel, oh, that was kind of the easy way out, to have, you know, somebody writing a book report or something where they can just tell it. And that, as a writer, as you know, all the time, it's that tension between show and tell. And sometimes you have to tell the thing to just get it out there, but boy, if you can show it so that your reader is experiencing it and feeling it, that's better, but it's very hard to do. About the only unusual talent I will grant myself is a weird, this is not terribly flattering actually to me when I think about it, but I have this uncanny ability to know what will interest a young girl. I guess I just froze at a certain level of development. Very handy. And so I just kind of know that this, you know, this will interest. The fact that Felicity has a friend whose parents have a different view about the revolution. Oh gosh, you know, attention and a friendship. Everybody knows about that. Everybody cares about that. If I can make that central to the story, that will make the story work. So again, it starts with my reader. It starts with the spirit of my reader. But it's an ongoing tension and an ongoing challenge that sometimes I meet, sometimes I don't. No more questions? So thank you very much. It was great. Caroline. Yeah, she did a fabulous
job. Valerie, there's always one of the great joys in life is to see someone who is really, really talented and they can convey that to an audience. It's not a usual quality. It's like a dancer, you're hearing their performance always at the top of their game, an athlete who can run down and take the basket. And I think we witnessed that today. But you've got to get more animated, you know. You gotta work on that, you know. Anyway, we have a lot of thank you so much. It was